Python, and R. Basics in these three programming languages can take you really far, even if you didn't expect that you were going to need them. So it is really, really important if you want to do anything that's even remotely going to touch upon data science or data sets or all of this sort of thing, to learn these programming languages, learn them early, practice them frequently as I am learning. It's not like riding a bike. And so I really wish that I had taken more time to learn these before. I've kind of just like a little bit in undergrad, and then just like as needed. But so just like kind of tweaking things to do things to make it so that I can do what I want, but not typically pretty and not like exactly how I would want and that sort of thing in it. So basically, I wish that I had taken time to really learn these things in depth, and so I'm getting more into them. This is not going to be a post about how to use any of these languages or anything. It's more just like why you should learn them, and some resources that are helpful to get started, as well as some really, really basics that can, simple things that can help out a lot. Okay, so let's dive in.
So let's step back a second and just talk about like what these things are. So Python is a programming language. It's a general programming language that's used a lot in bioinformatics, biology stuff. So you might have heard about like HTML, C++. These sort of things are used a lot for making like software and computer like apps. I don't know, all sorts of other stuff, but websites. But typically when it comes to data analysis for biology, bioinformatics, all of this sort of thing, they're often written in Python. And so learning Python is really great. And I'll get more into that in a minute. R is another programming language. It is often used for statistics as well as making nice plots and graphics. And so R can also be used in conjunction with Python. Python's more versatile. R is used a lot, has more of these like specialized uses that complements Python's general applicability. And then command line, that's just what you're going to be using like in your terminal. If you're on a Mac, or it's called the terminal or whatever, your terminal window. And this is where you're actually like moving around your computer, making files and that sort of thing. And we'll go over some really helpful like shortcuts. And this is not going to be a how-to guide, but just pointing you in the direction of some of the key things that you should know that will help you figure out a lot of things. And starting with Google. So if you talk to a data scientist, any sort of computer scientist, they're probably going to tell you that they Google a lot. And so don't feel bad about Googling. Google should be like your first stop if you have a question, that if you're trying to figure out how to do something. Also also learn how to get help with the various programs for using like commands. So in R, you can use help and then the thing in parentheses, or question mark and then space the thing. In Python, you can use help and the thing in parentheses, and in your terminal, you can use man and then space the thing you want help with. And this will bring up like the instructions, like the manual and all that stuff about how to use the specific program or the specific thingamabob. And then you can also Google it. There's this thing called like Stack Exchange, where people have asked a bunch of questions and people answer questions. And so basically there's a lot out there on the internet that you can use. You can typically find help for what you're looking for. Speaking of what you are looking for, there's this thing called GitHub. If you aren't familiar with GitHub, GitHub is your friend. Basically, GitHub is this depository where people deposit their code and like open access, so that you can then download it, you can make changes to it. And so so this can be like just random people's codes. It can be codes that people use to process their data that they use in a publication, and maybe you want to use it to process your own data, or that sort of thing, and various other applications. And you can modify the things because it's all open source. But you need to be able to know a little bit about what you're doing. So be able to use Python, be able to use R, be able to understand what their code is doing, and then change it to meet your needs. This is a really great thing about learning one of these programming languages. So if you say use R or use NumPy or Pandas, which are programs within Python, you can analyze data. You can make like spreadsheet type things, so data frame, but they're called like data frames and that sort of thing. So they have different names, but you might be used to working with Excel. Excel is really bad if you have a lot of large data sets. Excel will like crash on you. It is also, if you've ever tried to make a graph or anything on Excel, they have all those pretty things that are supposed to make it really easy. And it turns out to be very hard to actually customize it. But with R, you can make these really nice custom graphs with everything that you would like. And so it's not as intimidating as you might seem. It might seem because these programming languages, they have these things called like IDEs, so an integrated development environment. So basically you're writing the code using and it's doing this code stuff, it's processing it all, but it's doing it from a graphical user interface, a GUI. So for working with R, you're probably going to be working with RStudio. So basically, it's like a desktop application that you can use, and it has this. You can see I've been Googling a lot about R because I've been trying to analyze some data, but basically, RStudio, it has these windows, and you'll have a window which is your like console where you're actually writing your code, where you're like seeing things, and it has like where you can write your code, and you can do it like on the fly. So run lines of code at a time, and then it'll like give you the output and the results and everything. So a good thing to start early is to learn to run bits of code at a time rather than try to run it all, and that'll make it easier to figure out your errors. But it'll make nice plots in it. What's nice about R2 is that it'll list all of your variables and allow you to view the data. So you have like your variables and all this stuff. And so it makes it really easy, and then you can use the basic commands in order to access various things in a giant data set and that sort of thing. You can also do similar things in Python. There are tools like BioPython. They have some great resources and as well as tutorials about how to do the types of things that you might want to do. When you're working with Python, this really great things is called Jupyter and Jupyter notebooks. So basically these are like notebook-like formats where you can do a lot of stuff. So I was first introduced to these when I did a computational biology boot camp in my first year of grad school, and I learned a ton then. Unfortunately, I haven't retained all of what I've learned, but I did a lot. I remembered a lot of it, including how helpful these notebooks are. And a lot of times you'll get on GitHub, there'll be notebooks as well, and there's also, and then you can use them that way. But basically Jupyter, these notebooks, in addition to making it really nice and easy, you can have like markdown as well as like, so you can have like plain text, you can have and interspersed with code, and it makes it really nice so that you can like annotate your code, make it easier for people to run and work together and all of this various stuff. So it's really, really helpful. I like these Jupyter notebooks. You can make different ones for different projects. It's a web-based server, but it's going to be like running on your computer, or you can also have it run on a server, like a different computer that has stronger processing power. And so one of the things that you want to do is, if you're going to be doing any sort of like data science, if you're going to be having data from like structural biology, data sets are huge, and you're going to need to do a lot of processing, which you don't want to do all that on your local desktop. If you're dealing with like genomics data, those going to be huge. You're not going to be wanting to do that on your local desktop. You don't want to take up all the space on your desktop with the files, and you also don't want to run out your desktop memory, or as well as have things go really, really slowly on your desktop computer because it's not as powerful as like this really expensive giant server that your like your school or whatever has. So you want to get in touch with the IT department or whoever else in your lab knows how you can do it, and get set up to use a server. like a remote server. There might be multiple, and you can dock, and you're probably going to end up using something in your terminal like SSH to get onto the server. And then you can move things back and forth on the server with like SCP. And a technical note that if you want to copy a file and move it, then you're going to want to use, this include like -R for recursive, which is then use this. Oh, and you also, I'm sorry, not files, folders. So folders are also known as directories, and that R is going to be if you want to copy one of those. This is going to allow you to then access the server. You can start a Jupyter notebook from the server, and it'll give you a link that you can then copy and paste into the browser on your desktop. And so you can be running all the stuff remotely, but then accessing it and working with the code and everything right on your own desktop. Another thing I recently learned about is this are like virtual environments. So a lot of times when you are running a program, there's going to be a bunch of packages. So Python and R, these are just like the languages, but there's also these packages that you're going to need that are written in these languages. And so common packages, for example, are like NumPy and SciPy and ggplot and all of these various things, matplotlib, depending on your language. And so you're probably going to have a lot of different packages that you're going to need in order to run some sort of pipeline. So if you're using a bunch of different codes or whatever. So if you find something on GitHub, it's probably going to require a bunch of packages. Sometimes these will come with it, like a separate bundle type of thing. But other times you might have to load them separately. When you load them, so the packages, they often have a bunch of different versions because people will make updates to things, updates to their code, or that sort of thing. And for some of these big things like Python, like the language itself, these can be really massive updates, but sometimes they can be really minimal updates. But if they change the syntax, or if they change the way that the code is like interpreted and how you write different functions, then if you take a code and you try to run it with a newer version, say, of that software, then it's not going to work. And so you often want to have like multiple versions of Python or of some Python package on your desktop or like on your server or whatever. But your computer is going to get really confused if you try to send it to a bunch of different, if you have multiple versions. But you can use this thing called like a virtual environment, such as through Anaconda. You can do this like Conda activate and then have a custom like environment where you have the versions downloaded of all of the different packages and software and things that you'll need for that specific project, and then you don't have to worry about it. You can work in this virtual environment. So that's a really cool thing that I just learned about the other day. And yeah, you can also, if you download Python through Anaconda, it'll also come with a bunch of the packages that are really commonly used, like NumPy, SciPy, etc. So yeah, really, really helpful. And so I highly recommend that. But you're going to have to get used to like the basics of data structures and that sort of thing, like servers and command line stuff, all this stuff, like I'm really, really uncomfortable with. I don't know if computer scientists ever get intimidated by biochemists, but I know that I find computer science just like completely daunting, but I'm trying my best. So speaking of getting around, you want to be able to get familiar with some basic command line. Some of the really, really common things that you want are like PWD. This is going to tell you your present working directory. So when you start like your terminal, you want to start your terminal from the directory that has like all the stuff that you need. But you don't want to start like too far away from what you need, because then you're going to have really long file names. So if you had something slash something slash something slash something slash, basically the fewer slashes you are, the further deeper into into whatever directory you are, the shorter those links are going to have to be, and the less chance that your computer is going to get confused and finds the wrong version of something, or it's going to have to search a lot more stuff. So basically you want to be as close to the data that you want as possible when you start your terminal, but you still want to have access to everything that you're going to need to run that program. And then sometimes you can figure out, like, if you are not sure where you are located, then you can use pwd, which is going to tell you that present working directory. And then you can move around by using like cd, which lets you change directory to move to a different one. If you do cd ... that's going to take you up a level in directory. So like 1/level backwards. ls, that's a really helpful one too. This is going to like list what's in a directory. So if you were in a folder, which you can figure out which one you were in with pwd, and you do ls, that's going to tell you, list the files that are in there. rm is going to delete something. Make dir is going to make a new directory, so a new folder. When you're in the terminal, you can also use the arrow to go up to previous commands you've typed in. You can also do this with like R in Python typically, as well as use a tab to autofill file names, etc. So you type the beginning of it, and then once you have to type to the past the point where there's nothing else like it. And then once it's totally unique, then you press tab and it'll fill in the rest. Okay, so those with those. There's also, if you are, so when you're working, we talked about with like Python, how it has that thing where you can access your notebook from your local desktop through the web, or through like the web server. It's not like public or anything. People can't go and look. You can make notebooks public if you want, but this is different. It's just going to that, like, you're telling what port to go to or whatever. I don't know. Like I said, I'm really uncomfortable with all of the data science terminology, and I'm not pretending to be an expert at all. This is just things that the very, very basics. This is an outsider perspective of the things that I found helpful as someone who just needs these things, needs to know the basics, and needs to use them for doing very basic things in biology and biochemistry, where you might have to deal with a data set, or if there's a data set out there, have you ever seen like a paper published or whatever, and you're like, oh, I wonder about whether they checked this or that sort of thing. Well, if they publish the code that they use to analyze the data, then you can recreate that and go further and test what you would like to test, or analyze different data sets, or all sorts of stuff. And so you might not be like, I don't want to be a bioinformatician, but I want to be able to take a look at what's there and see if there's something interesting there. And so anyway, back to if you're working on a remote server, there's this thing called Xports. Xports is going to allow you to like run applications and actually run applications on a remote server, but actually see like graphical user interfaces, so see the GUI. So if you can run if you're like a structural biologist, it has this graphical interface. So when you're analyzing, like viewing this data and working with the data, trying to model your structures, this is going to be very data intensive, but you can run this on the remote server. But then if you're using Xports, you can actually see the screen and see the structures, rather than have it be happening on just in some box, like really far away. Okay. Speaking of like not being comfortable with data stuff, there's this thing called Galaxy, which is going to allow you to do a bunch of basic stuff without having to know much coding. It has a lot of stuff for like genomics. So if you want to deal with sequences, maybe you want to do some sequence alignment, that sort of thing. A lot of tools here where you can either download sequences from the web, or you can upload your own custom sequences. They have a bunch of training stuff as well. I haven't really used Galaxy much, but I've heard about it, and it sounds like it could be really interesting for a lot of different things. A great thing about Galaxy too is that you can do it like in the cloud without having to worry about like if there's public data or whatever out there, you can upload it you can like import it into Galaxy without having to import it actually onto your computer and take up a bunch of space. Or at least that's my understanding. Again, I'm very, very, very nervous with all of these things. Okay, yeah, so the basic thing, so like really just like remember Google is your friend. GitHub is your friend. Your friends are your friends. So make friends with people who know data science. They're often very, very helpful. And yeah, so really just, there's some great tutorials out there. I'll put some links to some things I found helpful. A lot of times though, like for a lot of times, it's good to learn like the very basics in coding languages and stuff. So when I was an undergrad, I took a basic intro to computer science class. And so I got familiar with some of the concepts of like for loops and if then and all of this various stuff. So it's good to get the basics in that. And a lot of what you see, like the tutorials and stuff, will be focused on those. So I just wanted to point out some of the things that you might want that are more kind of like specific for if you wanted to do biology. Some of the things that might come in helpful, and point to some of the tutorials and things for that. There's some really great YouTube videos and stuff, and I'm not pretending to be one of them. Okay, so, but I hope that this can help you be a little less intimidated. And again, it's really important that you like start early and practice, so you don't end up in a situation where you really, really want to analyze something, but you don't really have quite the skills, and so you have minimal skills, and so you're trying to piece together a bunch of different things and not sure if you're doing it right, wasting a bunch of time. Basically, yeah, you can hear how my weekend's going, but I'm having fun because it's really fun to be able to learn new things and know that I'm so close to being able to do things. And so yeah, so I really like so the whole thing with like I make my own graphics and everything. Like I like being able to customize my stuff, and being familiar with these coding languages is going to help you customize your own things, your own graphs, your own data analysis, all these various things. So there's a lot of great things that can come from learning it. It's just, there is a learning curve, and so start early. If I would do it again, I would have taken more, especially with R. I would have learned more R early. I did a little bit in undergrad, used someone else's code in grad school, which struggled with it. And now I'm trying to do some more in R, but I wish that I had taken time to really learn it, and then to practice these things, because it's not like riding a bike and practice, even if it's just doing really minor things, just periodically, just keep it fresh in your head. And yeah, so happy learning, and feel free to share some of the tools that you find helpful with learning. And that would be great, because there's so many tools out there that it's kind of overwhelming. Like, I don't know, like which are the best. So if you have feelings about that, let me know. Okay, thanks everyone, and hope that helped and wasn't just like, why isn't this being given by someone who actually knows what they're talking about? But I think that sometimes it's good to give like an outsider perspective. Okay, so bye.